An explosion occurred yesterday at Ukraine's embassy in Madrid, injuring one Ukrainian employee who was handling a letter addressed to the country's ambassador to Spain, officials said. The individual was slightly injured and is being treated at hospital while police are investigating. Kyiv's ambassador to Spain, Serhil Pohoreltsev, was the intended recipient of the envelope. So it was an intended murder attempt. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and a daily wrap-up show on Freedom TV channel. And I want to start with comment of the Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dmytro Kuleba. He was online in an hour after the incident.
The envelope arrived. In due course, the commandant of the embassy began to unpack it and an explosion occurred. The commandant was immediately taken away by an ambulance. He has already returned to the embassy. He was given first aid and nothing threatens his life. But of course, this is a very serious event. This is an attack on a diplomatic institution that is protected by international law. And I instructed all foreign diplomatic institutions of Ukraine to immediately strengthen security measures.
Spanish security forces have found another suspected explosive device hidden in an envelope mailed to an EU satellite center at the Torrejon de Ardoz Air Force Base, Reuters reported, citing the country's defense ministry. The satellite center is said to support the EU's common foreign and security policy by collecting information from space intelligence devices. You know, I won't even be speculating if it was Russia trying to assassinate our ambassador to Spain and destroy the satellite surveillance facility. Let's discuss only what's obvious about Russians, and a lot of things actually are. The absurd attempt to give out the bloody massacre in Bucha as crimes of Ukrainian army committed against its own people. The fact of the cruiser Moskva hit by Ukrainian weapons as if the fire broke out on board. The explosions of ammunition depots across the country. Someone was just smoking in the wrong place. The shameful flee from Kharkiv and Kherson, Kremlin titles as a strategic retreat. The fact of a criminal bombing of civilian infrastructure power plants, including the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, which, in case its nuclear core destabilized, will surpass Chernobyl in catastrophic consequences multifold. Kremlin treats almost as some breakthrough military strategy, while in fact, it is nothing else but the most common terrorism. The Kremlin calls mass graves fakes and fakes the truth so massively, for so long, so shamelessly and so massively, that most of the Russians believe it and in return call state's morbid natural resources addiction an economical thrive and loving Putin for his cruel, vicious pursuit for power. It all is so very Russian and is not surprising. What actually is surprising is the loss of that deadly exquisite KGB professional touch on murder and terror. I mean, you almost feel sorry for that Russian secret service that sends their super assassins to kill two people with a deadly poisonous substance. But according to the police, at the time of infection, about 500 people could have walked through the location where the objects of poisoning were found, and in total 131 people were actually poisoned, while both of the targets survived. Now, isn't it 131 reasons to think about how deeply degradation has penetrated into absolutely all layers of Russian society? The Ministerial Council is the central decision-making and governing body of the OSCE, and it is taking place today and tomorrow. This annual meeting is an opportunity for the foreign ministers to review and assess the security situation in the Euro-Atlantic and Eurasian area, as well as the organization's work in all its fields of activity. The annual meeting of the foreign ministers of the 57 OSCE participating states will be held at the invitation of the OSCE chairman in office, Poland's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Zbigniew Rau, and will take place in Lodz, Poland. Will it result in Russia being expelled? Ukraine made an appeal on Tuesday to suspend Russia from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe.
What is the added value of Russia's participation in OSCE after it has violated all 10 fundamental principles of the Helsinki Final Act? How does Russia contribute to the security and cooperation in Europe except to ruin it? It is common sense that after all Russia has done, it should not be present at this table. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba at the OSCE Annual Security Review Conference.
Dmitry Kuleba cited the Council of Europe, which expelled Russia as a member on March 16th. One day after the country informed the organization of its plans to withdraw. Experts and diplomats say that the OSCE lacks a viable mechanism for dismissing Russia from the OSCE. In the OSCE, all decisions require the consensus of the 57 participating states. There's only one exception to this rule. The so-called consensus -1 provision, which was established in 1992 at a Prague meeting of the Council of OSCE Ministers. At the time, it was decided that appropriate action may be taken if necessary in the absence of the consent of the state concerned in cases of clear, gross and uncorrected violations of OSCE commitments. The provision has been applied only once in the history of the OSCE. In July 1992, when Serbia and Montenegro was suspended for human rights violations and aggressive actions mostly against neighboring Bosnia-Herzegovina and the aftermath of the bloody breakup of the former Yugoslavia. I'm sorry, what? I mean, what is it exactly that holds you, ladies and gentlemen of OSCE, sitting there in your chairs and discussing Bucha, Kharkiv, infrastructure shellings, mass killings, tortures that Russia won't even bother to cover, all these clear, gross and uncorrected violations of OSCE commitments? Experts have argued that while Russia's brutal war against Ukraine and apparent war crimes would certainly justify suspension, such a proposal will be unlikely to succeed given the fact that several of Moscow's allies, such as Belarus and other members of the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, including Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, would likely oppose Russian expulsion. Correct me if I'm wrong. Following that logic, when we sentence a brutal murderer for death penalty, we really need to have his and his sidekicks' consent? Ukraine's Foreign Minister Kuleba insisted that if there is no appropriate suspension mechanism in place, then a procedure must be set up to get them out. The OSCE needs to make a tough choice. Leave things as they are and allow Russia to ruin the organization, or take action and find a way to suspend Russia, he said. Oh, what a tough choice indeed, to stand for Putin or against him.
There is no mechanism for excluding Russia from either the OSCE or from the UN. And I understand listeners and viewers who are outraged by Russia's actions. And let me assure you, I am outraged as well. What Russia is doing is absolutely horrific. It's barbaric. It's beyond the pale of human decency in many cases. But we here at this particular multilateral organization are going to continue to work within the confines of that organization to support Ukraine as best we can.
But OSCE diplomats in Vienna say that setting up a new procedure would again require a consensus decision, which would likely be vetoed by Russia and its allies. Oh, here we go again. Looks like when Putin is bored in his bunker, he just calls OSCE. A diplomatic source in Vienna says that Ukraine primarily wants to initiate a discussion on the topic with the aim of creating a new mechanism for expelling states, so that the OSCE is protected in the future from a single state taking the entire organization as a hostage. Oh, God bless you, lonely diplomatic source of common sense. Indeed, diplomats in Vienna worry that Russia may try to use its veto power in the coming month to paralyze or even dismantle the whole organization. Russia is currently blocking the approval of this year's OSCE budget. The OSCE can still function without a budget through monthly allotments payments that amount to 1/12 of the previous year's budget, but without an approved budget, the organization is prevented from implementing any new project or activity. Wait a second. So it is Putin now who's blocking OSCE and is able to prevent it from existing? Wow. You want dialogue? Well, come over. Come over to Ukraine. I will drive you myself to Bucha, Odessa, Kharkiv. Maybe then, when you leave your office for the field of actual warfare, you'll grasp the whole thing and will teach your students then properly. You cannot talk sense to a thug. A victory over him is the only way. It was Henry Keane and a daily wrap-up show on Freedom TV channel. See you tomorrow.